Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions. The mystery of Tiwanaku, the Andean city built 13,000 feet high by people nobody can identify. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. At 850 meters above sea level on the Bolivian altiplano, higher than most humans can comfortably breathe, in a landscape so exposed that temperatures fall below freezing almost every night of the year, someone built a city, not a village, not a ceremonial mound. A city with megalithic gateways, sunken courtyards, and stone blocks weighing up to 100 tons, cut to tolerances of less than a millimetre and fitted without mortar. The nearest quarry for the andesite stone used in the Puma Punku section of the site is 90 kilometers away across the altiplano and across an arm of Lake Titicaca. No written records describe how the stone was moved. No records name the people who built the city. The Inca, who came later and built an empire that stretched the length of South America, told the Spanish that Tiwanaku had been built by giants before the memory of man. Even they did not know who had done it. The site was occupied for more than 1,000 years, reached a population of perhaps 20,000 people, shaped the religious iconography of the entire Andes, and then, around 1000 AD, was abandoned. Why? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. For as long as human beings have told stories, they have told stories about what was lost. Every great culture on Earth carries myths of a golden age, a time before the current order, when civilization stood taller, knew more, and reached further than anything that came after. For centuries, scholars categorized these stories as allegory, comforting fictions invented by cultures to explain the gap between their aspirations and their achievements. But a quiet revolution in archaeology, geology, and oceanography has changed that calculus. The evidence now accumulating from seafloors, ice cores, and ancient texts is demanding a fundamental revision of the human story, one in which the line between myth and memory is far thinner than we imagined. The conventional timeline of civilization holds that complex urban society first emerged in Mesopotamia around 3500 BC. Before that, scattered farming villages, nomadic hunter-gatherers, and nothing more. But this tidy narrative has been challenged repeatedly by anomalous discoveries that do not fit the accepted sequence. Megalithic structures dated to 10,000 BC or earlier. Astronomical alignments encoded in monuments by cultures supposedly too primitive to understand the sky. Mathematical ratios embedded in architecture that would not be formally derived for thousands of years. These discoveries are not fringe fabrications. They are measured, published, and debated in peer-reviewed literature. They point toward a past far more complex than the textbooks describe. What happens when a civilization falls? Most of its knowledge disappears. The libraries burn, the engineers die, the farmers abandon the fields. Within a generation or two, the grandchildren of architects are living in the ruins of buildings they cannot build. We know this happened in the Bronze Age collapse of 1200 BC, when a networked civilization spanning the Mediterranean was destroyed in a matter of decades. We know it from the fall of Rome. History is not a steady march of progress. It is punctuated by catastrophic resets, after which humanity must begin again. The question is whether some of those resets happened far earlier than we know, and whether their traces are still waiting to be found beneath our feet. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades, and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding Tiwanaku, the Andean city built 13,000 feet high by people nobody can identify, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Tiwanaku is located on the southern shore of Lake Titicaca in modern Bolivia at an altitude of 3,850 meters above sea level. The site was continuously occupied from approximately 300 AD to 1000 AD, reaching its greatest extent and population, estimated at 15,000 to 20,000 people between 500 and 900 AD, making it the dominant political and religious center of the south-central Andes for centuries. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the Puma Punku section of the site contains H-shaped andesite blocks of extraordinary precision. Laser measurement surveys have recorded tolerances of approximately plus or minus 1 millimeter across surfaces that interlock with adjacent blocks. The largest single blocks weigh an estimated 100 tons. The nearest source of the red sandstone used in other sections is 10 kilometers away. The andesite source is approximately 90 kilometers distant across Lake Titicaca. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine the gateway of the sun, a single monolithic andesite block standing roughly 3 meters tall and 4 meters wide, is carved with a central figure, the staff god or gateway god, surrounded by 48 attendant figures. This iconography spread across the Andes and appears at sites hundreds of kilometers from Tiwanaku, indicating the city functioned as a religious and cultural center of continental influence during its peak. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Tiwanaku's agricultural system included raised field cultivation, suca calis, in which elevated earthen platforms separated by water channels allowed year-round farming at extreme altitude. Modern reconstruction experiments led by Alan Kalata of the University of Chicago demonstrated that these raised fields can produce crop yields competitive with modern fertilized farming and are resistant to the ground frosts that regularly destroy conventional highland crops. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of sediment cores taken from Lake Titicaca by Clark Erickson, Alan Kalata, and colleagues show a severe and prolonged drought beginning around 1000 AD, with lake levels dropping dramatically. Kalata and Charles Ortloff published evidence in 1996, linking this drought directly to the collapse of Tiwanaku's raised field agricultural system and the subsequent abandonment of the city. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Arthur Pesnansky, a Bolivian engineer and archaeologist who studied Tiwanaku in the early 20th century, proposed a construction date of 15000 BC based on astronomical alignments he calculated for the Calisasea platform. His dating is rejected by all mainstream archaeologists, who place the site's construction firmly within the first millennium AD based on radiocarbon dating, ceramic sequences, and stratigraphic analysis. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Tiwanaku, the Andean city built 13,000 feet high by people nobody can identify. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Alan Collada and Charles Ortloff's climate collapse hypothesis holds that a century-long drought beginning around 1000 AD destroyed Tiwanaku's raised field agriculture, which depended on stable lake water levels for its irrigation channels. Unable to feed its population, the city was gradually abandoned over several decades. This theory is supported by lake sediment core data and is the current mainstream explanation, though some scholars note that other Andean cultures survived the same drought. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that Tiwanaku's builders are now understood by most archaeologists to be the ancestors of the Aymara-speaking people of the Lake Titicaca basin, representing a distinct Andean high civilization that later profoundly influenced the Inca through the intermediary Huari culture. Critics of alternative theories note that the Puma Punku precision, while impressive, can be explained by sustained skilled stoneworking traditions rather than any advanced or external technology. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that Arthur Pesnansky's ancient civilization hypothesis, that Tiwanaku was built by a now unknown people tens of thousands of years before accepted history, has been comprehensively rejected by radiocarbon dating and stratigraphy, but used to circulate in popular literature. More recent variants propose pre-Columbian contact with Old World civilizations to explain the Puma Punku precision. No archaeological evidence supports any such contact. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree, that is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Tiwanaku, the Andean city built 13,000 feet high by people nobody can identify, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes sediment cores from Lake Titicaca document a pronounced drought episode beginning around 1000 AD, with geochemical proxies showing sharply reduced precipitation and falling lake levels persisting for approximately a century. This physical climate record is the strongest evidence for the collapse hypothesis and has been confirmed by multiple independent research teams using different proxy methods, including pollen analysis, diatom assemblages, and oxygen isotope ratios. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented precision measurements of the Puma Punku H-blocks using modern laser equipment have recorded surface tolerances of approximately 1 millimetre across interlocking faces. The blocks fit together in a manner consistent with prefabrication to exact specifications rather than on-site fitting. Drill holes of consistent diameter are visible in several blocks. The tool technology required to produce this precision remains debated, but is not considered impossible for a sustained stoneworking tradition. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. The staff god iconography of the Gateway of the Sun appears at Huari sites in coastal Peru, at Pucara in the northern Titicaca Basin, and at sites as far north as the Ecuadorian highlands, documenting the geographic reach of Tiwanaku's cultural influence. The diffusion of this symbol system across the Andes provides archaeological evidence that Tiwanaku functioned as a genuine imperial or at least pan-regional religious center rather than a locally important site. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Tiwanaku, the Andean city built 13,000 feet high by people nobody can identify. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Bolivia has invested significantly in excavating and restoring Tiwanaku, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a central element of Bolivian national identity. The climate drought hypothesis has been considerably strengthened by 2 decades of paleoclimatology work on Lake Titicaca sediment cores. Alan Colada's raised field reconstruction projects demonstrated the sophistication of Tiwanaku agriculture. The Puma Punku precision continues to attract popular speculation, but is increasingly well documented by conventional archaeological survey. The identity of Tiwanaku's builders, likely Aymara ancestral populations, is less mysterious than popular accounts suggest. What remains genuinely open is the full explanation for the city's abandonment and the exact mechanisms by which its stone was transported and worked. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Tiwanaku, the Andean city built 13,000 feet high by people nobody can identify, from the historical record, through physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Tiwanaku ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.